Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about solving simple equations. So, you need to know some properties. So you should know these already, but we'll go back and review them. The addition property of equality says if A is equal to B, then A plus C is equal to B plus C. So if I have two numbers that are the same and I add the same number to both sides of this, it stays the same. It's kind of like a balance. Okay? If I have a balance and it's balanced perfectly with A and B here, and then I take a C and I add it to both sides of this thing, it should stay perfectly in balance. Okay? So, also the subtraction property of equality works exactly the same way. If A is equal to B, then A minus C is equal to B minus C. Okay, so an example for you. If A is equal to 5, then, so these two things are equal. A and 5 are the same. If I add 2 to both sides of this, then A plus 2 equals 5 plus 2. And so we can say that A plus 2 is equal to 7. Okay, so some other properties you should know. The multiplication property of equality. If A is equal to B again, then A times C is equal to B times C. It works the same way as the addition property does. And also division property of equality. If A equals B, then A divided by C is equal to B divided by C. Now also remember that fractions just really are division. That's all they are. So when you see A over C like this, that really means A divided by C. All right, so let's solve this real simple one here. It says solve the equation x minus 7 equals 6. So what we want to do is we want to balance this. We want to get rid of this minus 7 right here. So we're going to add 7 to both sides of this equation. And that's going to make this go away and leave me with just x over here. And then negative 6 plus 7 is 1. And I'm done. I can't go any farther than that. Okay, so you try this one. So I'm going to have you pause the video here real quick and then solve this and then jump back on here. And we'll compare what we got. Okay, so you got y plus 3.4 is equal to 0.5. So what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 3.4 from both sides of this equation. That's going to make this 3.4 go away here. It's going to leave me with y equals, and then I take 0.5 and I subtract 3.4, and I should get negative 2.9. And I'm done again. Okay, here's another one. Go ahead and pause the video for just a second and see if you can do this one. Solve the equation h plus 2 pi equals 3 pi. Now, keep in mind, remember, pi is just a number. Okay, it's 3.14 approximately, but it's just a number like 2 or any other number. Okay, so you treat it just like it's any other number. And so here's your variable h. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, solve for h, and then come back here and see what you got. Okay, so here's my variable. I want to get rid of this number right here, so I'm going to subtract 2 pi from both sides. So I get this. This goes away. I'm left with h on this side, which is what I wanted. 3 pi minus 2 pi. Okay, so I have think of it this way. I got 3 pi's and I get rid of 2 pi's. What do I have left? I have 1 pi, which is just pi. And that's my answer. H is pi. Okay, here's one that's just a little bit more tricky. It says negative 3/4 n equals negative 2. Now here's what I always do. This negative sign is kind of right here in the middle. So something to consider is this. If I have negative 3/4 like this, that is the same thing as negative 3 divided by 4, which is the same thing as 3 divided by negative 4. Those are all the same thing. Okay, so what I always like to do is to be consistent and make it simpler for myself. I always take the negative, no matter where it is here, and I just put it in the numerator. Okay, I put in the top number. So how do I solve this? Well, this really means, if I rewrote this, this really means negative 3 divided by 4 times n equals negative 2. So if I want to undo that, what I can do is I could multiply both sides of the equation by 4. And then that 4 cancels out that 4 right there, and I'm left with negative 3n equals negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. And now I can divide both sides by negative 3, and the negative 3 goes away, and I'm just left with n on the one side, and then a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and I'm left with 8 thirds. And I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, in elementary school, they sometimes had you change this to a mixed number, so it'd be, what, 2 2/3? Okay, the higher you go in math, the less you do that kind of stuff. You just leave it an improper fraction like that. Okay? And don't change it to a decimal. Okay? Again, the higher you go in math, the less you use decimals and the more you use fractions. Okay. Solve the equation. Let's do this here. I don't want to uncover all this. Solve the equation pi times x equals 3 pi. Okay, so pi times x. So we want to get rid of the pi, because remember, that's just a number. So I'm going to divide both sides by pi. The pi's are going to cancel out. I'm left with x on this side. And 3 pi divided by pi is just 3. And you're done. Okay, so I'd like you to pause the video here, and I'd like you to do these two problems. Y divided by 4 equals negative 7, and 0.09w equals 1.8. So go ahead and pause the video and give that a try, and then jump back on here. Okay, so this is an easy one. Let's do this one first. Okay, so we're going to multiply both sides by 4. And that's going to cancel out that 4 right there. And I'm going to be left with y, which is what I wanted. And then negative 7 times 4 is just negative 28. Okay, this one over here is a little trickier because there's a decimal. Okay, so we're going to divide both sides by 0.09. Okay, now if you got a calculator, you're probably okay to calculate this with a calculator. If you don't, remember this is a review on how to divide fractions. So you're taking 1.8 and you're dividing it by 0.09. So I'm going to move the decimal 2 places over here. So I got to move the decimal 2 places over here. So this is just really 9 going into 180. Okay, so 9 goes into 18 twice. 2 times 9 is 18. Subtract, that leaves 0. Bring my 0 down. 9 goes into 0 0 times. So this is 20. Okay, so hopefully you got both of those right. All right. What value of k makes the equation k plus 4 divided by 0.2 equal to 5 true? All right, so this is just another way of saying, hey, how do you solve for k in this problem? But you also have to do your orders of operations on this thing. Okay, you got to remember your PEMDAS. Parentheses first, there's no parentheses. Exponents second, there's no exponents. Multiplication, division third. Oh, now here we have division. So what a lot of people make a mistake is they subtract 4 from both sides first. And you don't want to do that. The first thing you need to do is do the division. So 4 divided by 0.2. Let's just go over here and just do this real quick. 4 divided by 0.2. So I move the decimal once, I move the decimal once. That's the same problem as 40 divided by 2, which is 20. Okay, so this is the same as k plus 20 equals 5. And now the next step, we have to subtract 20 from both sides. And I get K equals negative 15. Okay. Got a little story problem here. So the melting point of a solid is the temperature at which the solid becomes a liquid. That's what melting point is. Okay, so if you think about it, ice, water, and steam are all the same thing, except that they're all water, but water becomes a solid when it reaches 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It freezes and becomes a solid. It becomes ice. Okay, then it melts at 32 degrees and becomes water. And then at 212 degrees, it turns to steam. It turns to a gas. Okay, so we're talking about the melting point of this particular solid, and we don't know what it is the temperature at which the solid becomes a liquid. So the melting point of bromine is 1/30th the melting point of nitrogen. So write and solve an equation to find the melting point of nitrogen. Okay, so it's a little bit tricky. So we know that let's call our variable the melting. We'll call it the melting point. We'll call it M. Okay. So bromine is 1/30th that of the melting point of nitrogen. So the melting point of nitrogen, let's call it N, and then 1/30th of N equals the melting point of bromine. Okay, now what we need to do is find the melting point of nitrogen. Now, we're not going to get a number on this problem because we don't have a number in here that tells us anything except the 1/30th. Okay, so we're going to get an equation. So if I want to find the melting point of nitrogen, I'm going to solve for N. So I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by 30. Okay, the 30 cancels the 1/30th out. Okay, so then I get N equals 30 times B. And that's as far as I can go. So if I knew what the melting point of bromine was, I could put it in here, and then I could multiply that by 30, and it would tell me the melting point of nitrogen. Okay, you try this one. Oops. The melting point of mercury is 1/4 the melting point of krypton. Write and solve an equation to find the melting point of krypton. So I'm going to let you pause the video here, and then you can solve the problem and jump back on. Okay, so we're going to call the melting point of mercury M, and we're going to call the melting point of krypton K. And it says the melting point of mercury is 1/4 the melting point of krypton. So M equals 1/4 of K. And now we got to solve for krypton, so we need to get rid of the 1/4. So you get rid of 1/4 by multiplying by 4. Okay, so I got to do both sides of the equation when I do that. Okay, so this cancels that. And I'm left with K equals 4 times M. And I always like to write it like this. I always like to put the variable that I'm solving for on the left-hand side. I don't know why, it's just my own personal thing. This is not wrong. You can write it that way if you like. Okay, solve this equation. P minus 8 divided by 1/2 equals 3. Now, there's a little bit of a tricky thing here. Be very careful on this one. Because the first thing is you got to know your orders of operations. And we did a problem just exactly like this before, but it didn't have a fraction right here. Okay? So you're going to do this part first because that's your order of operations. Division comes before subtraction. However, keep in mind that 8 divided by 1/2 is not the same thing as 8 divided in half. Those mean two different things. 8 divided in half means 8 divided by 2, which would be 4. 8 divided by half means 8 divided by 1/2 like this. And remember, when we divide fractions, we take the bottom, we invert and multiply. So we take the bottom one, the denominator, and we invert it, which means we flip it upside down. And then we multiply. So this is 16 over 1, which is just 16. So this part right here is 16. So we're going to rewrite this as P minus 16 equals -3. Okay, now we're going to add 16 to both sides. And P equals 13. -3 plus 16 is 13. Notice I always work vertically and I always put a box around my answer. Okay, here's another one. Solve Q plus the absolute value of -10 equals 2. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's find out what the absolute value of -10 is. The absolute value of -10 is just +10. So this is Q plus 10 equals 2. Now this is easy because I just have one step left. I'm going to go ahead and subtract my 10 from both sides. And I get Q equals -8. Box around my answer. Okay, so here's your assignment. There's a couple 3 pages here. You're going to do the odd problems, 1 through 47 odd. Okay, and I will get those from you in class, and I'll see you later.